when I looked at all of the trades that I made for a specific purpose, I had siloed out the different trades that I was making under different buckets. One was personal, one I called the fund, and then I have another one, which I'm not going to talk about right now. The fund is what we're going to talk about here. I currently have a good amount of cards in there, and I'm not going to go over what I have at this moment, maybe at a later podcast. But I will go over what I had before, my actual sales that I made, the big losses that I took, the big gains that I had, and then all of the learnings that I got from putting all of that into an AI brain. And I'm going to share that all with you. So here we go. So what we're going to do now is actually go over on screen the report that I had from my AI. And then I'm going to actually show you the win rate, the tags, all of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about. So if you're on Apple Podcasts or if you're on Spotify, this might be a good time to check out my YouTube because this is going to be very heavy numbers focused and I'm going to introduce a lot of concepts. So the first thing that it goes over here is that the dramatic difference between sold and held cards validates the portfolio management thesis. Losers were correctly identified and cut winners were retained. It talks about win rates. So what I did with this AI is I fed it all of my sales. And before I actually did that, I prepped all of those sales by doing what I call meta tags. And this is something I haven't brought up yet. So this is fresh Slapnomics idea gen for you guys. I believe that meta tags are the key to being able to have intelligence from our data. In order to be able to check and see what trades did well and why, we need to establish patterns of what did well and then figure out why the combination of those did well. And that's going to give us the key to how we can make better decisions in the future as to what we buy. Because there are so many cards to buy, guys. You can only do case hits. You can only do golds. You can only do refractors. You can only do base. You can only do optic. You can only do prism. You can only do what's native to your country, wherever that is. Spain, Italy, Portugal. So with that total amount of data, what's becoming more and more important, not just here in the sports card and TCG world, but also in the actual world of business, is going to be data intelligence. So let's go down and see what the actual performance was. Now, a pretty easy key insight here comes at us right off the bat. A GOAT player is pretty much all you should be buying from this data. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying you can't prospect in soccer, and I'm not saying you can't make money off of prospects or players that aren't at that GOAT tier. One qualification that's super necessary here is to say that I was very new to soccer when I was first starting out a year ago. So the decisions that I made were all over the place. I was thinking in terms of a broad portfolio of assets. When I put together this plan, it was actually, here's my number of funds, and I want to spread these across different market caps, mid, small, large. And then I also want to put them across international, Portuguese players, American players, French players, etc. And my finance brain wanted to do that whole broad portfolio of assets so that I could diversify. Well, we'll find out a little bit down the road what actually happened with that. So drawing your attention over here to 1.1 on the winning tags, you're going to see the first tag, GOAT player. I went through every single card that I had sold. I put if it was a GOAT, which was Ronaldo and Messi. Pretty easy for these ones. My net PL for that was $9,089 with a 72.9% win rate and a 40.7% return. So really great numbers off of that. And that's just what I sold. So off of 48 cards, pretty good stuff on that. The second tag that I put in was a GOAT set. And to me, there are two GOAT sets when you're looking at flipping cards. Those are Topps Chrome and Panini Prism. Now, I know a lot of the soccer guys are going to come yell at me because there's a lot of amazing sets, and some of them are more high-end than both of those. Something like Flawless, some of the immaculate sets in National Treasure before they started putting those crappy patches in. But when it comes to flipping, to being able to have things move liquidly on a month-to-month basis, Prism and Topps Chrome have brand recognition that spans across sports as well as those other brands, but it's established. Everyone knows what a Prism parallel is. Everybody knows what the Topps Chrome parallels look like. So for me, the two GOAT sets in soccer were not just Prism and Topps Chrome. They were the first sets of those, which were 2014 Panini Prism World Cup and 2017 Topps Chrome UEFA. So early on, I bought a lot of that 2014 World Cup Prism. I really like that set. It's very clean, it's aesthetically pleasing, and it's going to last forever. It's timeless. So on only 28 cards that I sold from that set, I made over $7,000, and my win rate was over 82% on that. The return from those cards was actually the largest that I have out of any tag. Quick clarification there, a lot of these tags are going to be spread out across multiple things. Goat player, goat set, and first are all tags that would be applied to a 2014 Panini Prism World Cup Messi card. So that brings us to the third tag, which is first. I wanted to designate across different sets, even if they weren't a goat set like the Topps Chrome and the Panini Prism, if it was a first set. So 2015 Select, that would get you your first tag. As you can see, if you're following along on YouTube, there were 28 goat sets and 38 first. So that means there were 10 first sets that weren't part of the GOAT sets. Now, our next tag is going to be one that I think is most exciting for people to see results of. I called it rare, and it was anything that was around 50 or less on the serial number for a card. A lot of us want to look at scarcity as a huge determinant of value gain, and I wanted to test that theory, at least in the short term, because all of these trades were 10 months or less. So does a card being rare help you win? And of course, that's assuming that my judgment buying that rare card was also good and that I'm not just buying some random card because it's rare. Hint, hint, I did that a lot when I first started out. The rare returns were solid, 53% on the win rate, and my net PL on it was over 8,000. So the returns were actually a little bit smaller, about 20% just from that tag. But when I first started out, I was focusing on cards that were rare because I think that really drives up value when you have a small market and more people come into it. Two other tags of note really quickly here. I had case hit and I had an elite player being a tier down from those goats, someone like Mbappe or Holland. And then the case hits, of course, incredibly important to track. Huge call out on the case hits. You will see 20 on the count if you're following on YouTube. And those are the 20 that I sold. My net P&L on that was over $2,500. The win rate was 75%. Just a really, really solid subset. And the reason that the number is only 20 is because I kept most of my case hit. About 8 months ago, one of my biggest shifts in philosophy was understanding that the diversified portfolio method was the wrong way to go about things. That demand cycles through doorways and that those doorways open up pretty much one or two at a time. I believed, and I still believe, that case hits are one of the first of the tags that are going to get a boost because flippers come in, they know case hits, and people that buy from flippers also know case hits. Amazing stuff. And I will tell you right now, most of my stuff I'm holding right now are case hits. All right, so enough of just throwing a bunch of numbers at you. I'm going to give you a key concept that I learned from this. Stacking multiple tags dramatically improves performance. I'm going to say that again. Stacking multiple tags dramatically increases performance. If I have a goat plus a goat set plus a first, that win rate for me was over 80%. It was 81.5%. And my return was 49% off of that. Similarly, rare plus first. So if it's in the first set, whether it's Donruss Optic, Topps Chrome, Flawless, plus it's rare for 50 or below, that win rate was 84.6%. Little caveat here to call out, we only had a count on both of those, the GOAT plus GOAT set plus first of 27 and the rare plus first of 26, under 30. So these are a little bit cherry picked and we shouldn't get too ahead of our skis in order to say anything rare and of a first set is going to drive hard in value over 3 to 6 months. I don't think we want to make that conclusion off a small limited data set, just throwing that out there. Now, you might be thinking, this is just easy, right? All you have to do is tag everything, know what those mental models look like, apply that. So I just want to buy a Messi from the first set, make sure it's rare, good to go, right? Well, if you got 4+ winner tags, which there were only 5 in my data set, my win rate was 100%. So if you're only looking at a data set of 5, then yes, that is true. But the next one here, 5+ total tags, my win rate actually dropped, went down to 77.8%. And the difference between those two, to close this part out, is that winner tags are kind of implicitly going to have a higher win rate. If GOAT is good, GOAT set is great, and first is good and rare is good, you put all that together and you're probably cooking with grease here. But when you say total tags, there's going to be tags that I talk about in a little bit that were not so great. And if you start muddying the waters with those, that's where you start getting your win rate go down dramatically. So what brands really did it for us? Panini Prism World Cup 2014, my first love in the soccer world, got me a 73% win rate. 38 of those cards that I sold, 42% return. And I happen to sell all of those pretty near the top of 2025. Some of the other numbers here, Topps Chrome, I have 27 that I sold, but really I kept the best for my current holdings going into the World Cup. So that number is a little bit skewed and that return is going to be a lot higher later. Interesting to note that Panini Immaculate had a 100% win rate. Only 3 cards on that, but I guess when I went Immaculate, things went well. Critical finding from this, per the AI, the World Cup premium is real and substantial. So if you believe in AI and what it's telling you, there's some advice. One last thing on the winners. Before we get to the humble pie that I get to eat, we have winning players also broken out here. The GOAT tier and Elite tier are the profit centers. So Messi, Ronaldo, and then Pulisic, Mbappe, Haaland, and Yamal. You might get upset hearing Pulisic is in the elite tier, but in terms of his market, he absolutely is. He's in the American market, which constitutes 52% of the resale market of the entire world for sports cards. So the biggest American player in the biggest market is incredibly important in terms of how the money flows. And if you're watching along on YouTube, you can see that all of those elite players were wins. Messi had an 80% win rate. I mean, his market went bananas. So if you bought Messi early enough, you were doing well. Ronaldo went over 58%, but got pretty good profit and loss on that because I bought some big cards. And then Pulisic, honestly, I'm holding all of my Pulisic. I honestly can't believe it says I've sold 33 Pulisic cards because I think 80% of what I'm holding right now is Pulisic case hits. Definitely interesting to note here that Haaland came in big with a 75% win rate. So 3 out of 4 times that I bought a Haaland card, I ended up selling it for a profit, for a win. And honestly, Haaland is the type of player in that certain situation he was in that I really like. He has shown himself to have an elite ceiling. He's shown himself to be an incredible scorer, a generational scorer, and that's something that the card market always loves and values. He's going to bring in new people because he's always scoring goals and everyone sees this giant Goliath of a man running around. So when everybody was dumping Haaland, I was seeing that as a good opportunity to catch a falling knife, or in other terms, to catch my post-hype sleeper. Haaland had an amazing run-up because of COVID and because he was a rookie during that time and because he was much ballyhooed. 2020 to 2022, just incredible gains. And then from there, just diving down until about mid 2025. And I started buying early 2025. So I still have some Haaland, and I still think he's a great hold going into the World Cup, especially when he's doing well in Ballon d'Or voting so far. So I've victory lapped enough. Let's talk about what failed, because this is actually the most critical stuff for me. And this is what I changed most of my philosophy and my actual practical things going into the future based on this. Here are the tags that lost me money. I had a tag called Bucket. And Bucket for me was the World Cup basket. It was the players that I thought could be elite members of their national team and might get some spotlight shined on them. So it was players like Gio Reyna. It was some women players like Sophia Smith, up-and-comers like Alejandro Garnacho or Endrick, Vinny Jr., another big one. So this bucket is referring to what I was talking about earlier, that broad basket of quote-unquote assets that I was trying to grab. And that bucket gave me a 14.8% win rate, and I lost over $1,100 because of those 27 sales. The second losing tag was Host. This is more specifically geared to what I was saying before, Gio Reyna. He's a perfect example of Host. He's part of a host nation, that being Canada, the US, Mexico, but he's not elite. So he's not Christian Pulisic. He's not the face of the franchise, which of those 3 countries, Pulisic was actually the only one that I deemed elite in terms of these tags. So a lot of Reyna, a lot of Fuller and Balogun, some Ricardo Pepi. Again, I was young, I was dumb, and my win rate was 38%, which honestly, it felt more painful than that. And I believe we'll get into that in a second. The other losing tags that I had was just rookie cards that weren't GOATs or elites. And that goes hand in hand with the idea that scarcity for its own sake is wrong. Rookie card for its own sake, also wrong. Someone still has to want to buy that. And the last one, the hot hype plays, absolutely destroyed me. A lot of that was Alejandro Garnacho, and that was just trying to catch a little bit of prospecting when I knew nothing about that. So, hey, didn't turn out well. Who would have thought? Losing brands, Topps Merlin, Panini Donruss Optic, those were not our friends when it came to these flips. And both of those being second tier flipping brands. Those brands are a little bit more on the collecting side than the flipping side or long-term investment side. And you can see they're losing players. Alejandro Garnacho with 3 cards lost me $1,500. Prospect trap. I think that was putting it pretty lightly. I think the AI was pretty nice about it. And then Endrick lost me over 1,000 on 12 cards. I probably should have just waited a little bit for Endrick the Wunderkind. So what takeaway do we have from all this? I'm going to tell you right now. So demand in alternative asset markets doesn't work like ETFs. There's no broad-based bid for World Cup exposure. Capital concentrates in flagships, not in baskets of secondary names. When someone wants to go buy a card, they go and they buy something that they know, and they buy one card, or maybe they buy a couple cards. They do not go buy a broad basket of assets so that they can get exposure to different parts of the soccer market. That's not really how things work, unless you're me doing weird things that I shouldn't have done. I've said before in some podcasts that demand works in windows. I truly believe that. We saw this first with Messi. Everybody started buying up all the Messi cards. Then it went to Ronaldo because Messi cards got bid up so much that everyone looked at Ronaldo and saw how cheap it was. Then demand moved into where I thought it was going to move into, which was the case hits, starting with kabooms, because people started gearing up for the World Cup. It started getting a little bit closer. And I feel like when one person starts buying kabooms, other people notice it or they start talking to their buddies about it. And then soon, within a night, it seems, all of the kabooms are up double. And that's what happened, especially Messi's kabooms got crazy. I tell this story because I kick myself so much about it, but when I was at SoCo last year, which was during the National in the beginning of August, I vended there. And this was such an amazing opportunity to be able to buy soccer cards. It was before a lot of the demand had filtered into a lot of the players. Messi cards were expensive, but they hadn't quite hit their peak. They were still about to almost double after that. And kabooms hadn't really become a quote unquote thing yet. At the end of SoCo, after selling a bunch of cards, a lot of my Panini Prism, I was pretty cash flush. I saw one of the other vendors look through his table, and it was literally 2 hours before I was about to leave. And I saw that he had a 2017 Messi Kaboom PSA 10. And I was like, huh. I had just started formulating the concept that case hits were going to be the next move into. And so I was very excited about this card, and I had the cash jingling in my pocket, and it's sitting right there, a nice PSA 10. And I asked him what he wanted for it, and he said, someone offered me $9K, and I turned him down. Now, that card has gone for like $40,000 since. But at that time, $9K was very nice. So I thought a little bit, and I said, I'll give you $10K cash right here, right now. And he hemmed and he hawed, and probably a solid 20 seconds, he sat there and he thought about it. And he went, I'm going to take it and auction it on Golden or auction on Fanatics. Can't remember which. And at that moment, I could have sweetened the deal enough, maybe thrown $500, maybe $1,000 on there, and I could have gotten that card. And this is one of my biggest misses that I think about all the time, because it was there. I had my investment thesis. I knew what the rarity was on that specific card, and I just let it pass. Because honestly, it's hard to have conviction over one card or two specific cards. We get excited about so many things at one time that's hard to prioritize and know exactly what our targets are. That's why this sheet and this analysis is so incredibly important for the future, making better investment decisions, because we can look back and see where our decisions went wrong in the past, where they went right in the past, but also where they went extremely right. And we can build out those patterns from those and draw out those tags so that we know what went into the bad, good, and the amazing. So what I could do now is show you section 4, which is where off of 311 sales, my good friend Claude AI gave me a complete formulaic blueprint on what cards I should be targeting in my reshifting into new assets. I'm going to save that for later, build up a little bit of anticipation for you guys, but I will go over the operational principles before I get you out of here, because you got to do some of the work, you know? I can't just hand it all off to you guys, but maybe in the future I will. So what principles did we get out of all of this? We put in a bunch of data. We saw what things worked, what didn't. The operational principles that we pulled out: high-end positions have the best win rate. This was 72% in sales. And concentration quality beats diversification in quantity. That is such a big insight, and it totally shifted how I was looking at cards for this specific project. There was $55,000 that I initially put into this project for the World Cup 11 months ago. $55,000. And I thought buying all of these $100, $200, $250 cards would be cool because it would diversify things and I could keep an eye on what was going on and see what moved. But the AI is absolutely right here. Fewer large positions in higher conviction targets is the way to go. And a little Easter egg for you guys: exit strategy: sell into the catalyst, not after the outcome. Always buy the rumor, sell the news. The news of the World Cup is really before the games start getting played. At that time, you really start gambling because it's saying, how far do I think this player is going to go? The entire thesis of trying to buy and sell into the World Cup is that it is a new ultra liquidity event. 2022 World Cup in Qatar, 2018 World Cup in Russia did not even come close to the impact that the World Cup in America is going to have on the card market, as well as just the game itself and how it continues to grow here in the United States. And the beautiful thing is we have these windows. We know exactly when they're going to be. We don't have to guess. Timing is everything. We have the timing. It's very exciting times, guys. We're seeing the growing up of a market happen before our eyes. And how cool is it to be a part of that? So here's a summary of some of the things that I talked about today. Looking back through all of your purchases and your sales can give you a good guideline of what you've done well and what you've done not so well, so that your future decisions are going to be at that higher level of knowledge that you've obtained. Using things like meta tags allows us to spot patterns in our past buys and sells so that we can figure out what worked and what didn't in true creative ways. Finding that the combination of many of these tags led to a huge win rate is an incredible insight that's going to have such practical value for me when I look at my purchases going forward. And I'm sure you can imagine what that would do for you as well. And I know I mentioned that I would talk about other sports. So here's me doing that. All sports are going to be different when it comes to sports cards. When I say buy only the GOATs, well, that makes a lot of sense for soccer because it's a very illiquid market. And all of the people are going to be crowding through those very small windows of those very small pool of players. But in more mature markets like baseball, basketball, and football, the demand can be more widespread. And we see that a lot, especially in the baseball market, which has such a huge wide base. And lastly, it all comes down to decision making. When you're going to cut your losers, are you going to let your winners ride? Do you still believe that there's going to be demand catalysts that are going to come? Or is it time to go ahead and take some of those gains off the table? That's been one of the things that I've struggled with most. But using data gives us a clearer path of understanding a little bit better and forecasting what those points might be where we should be jumping off. So, as always, thanks so much for being with me here on Slabnomics, letting me draw through all of the stuff that's really important to me. Please let me know what's been important to you, because I'm going to be doing a lot of projects around things like comparing Panini Prism to Topps Chrome, comparing different refractors to each other and seeing what parallels are more or less valuable. If there's any of those that I've mentioned that seem really valuable to you, please let me know. Pop into my DMs or throw a comment onto any of my content and let me know what you think. Be sure to head to slabnomics.com if you want my comp newsletter, which is free, comes out every Saturday, and allows you to keep track of many different markets on a weekly basis, as well as me provide some of the frameworks at a deeper level. So again, thanks for being here. As always, keep building, and I will talk to you later.